All right, I think we're live. So, new edition. I got a Coleman catalytic heater, and I was looking around for some deals. Love getting good deals. One of my favorite things. And I found a Coleman dual fuel stove, which I'd been wanting for a while. And it was on Facebook Marketplace, and there was one for 70. I think they're brand new, like $169, $189. Anyways, I found one for 25. I'm stocking up on some gear because I'm going to be go camping soon and doing stuff with the family, but also just things I've always wanted to get, like the older stuff, old Coleman stuff. I always dig, and it's always good just to have that stuff just in case. And then an old TV. So some new stuff's coming soon. I'm going to be decorating this up. And a couple nerd projects. Anyways, tonight's live stream, I have a question that was sent to me a while ago, and I answered it a long time ago. And the person who asked it was MrMemphis. And anyone who was on the old SLA public forum probably remembers him. And then later, when everything happened and I went to the Bravo Hood and I started my thing, which was 13 years ago, he came over and was posted on that and was a cool dude. And he just was a good guy. And we talked and we messaged, and there's a lot of guys on that forum. I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of members, but there was a lot of guys on that forum that made it a good place. I was really bummed out when it went away, even though I wasn't there anymore, because there was just so much stuff up there. If it was up to me, I would have kept an archive up, but the way things are going, Me Too and all that, I understand why forums like that went away. Anyways, MrMemphis, I just read he recently passed away, and he was a good dude, and that bums me out. And I was going through some emails, and I actually found a question that he had sent me back in the day. So the title of this video, which was like, what is the first piece of reading material you would tell an AFC to bury his nose into, was the official question. But what's the books every AFC needs to read? So first off, I think you got to understand that like there's differences, and I don't want to get too much into it, but I could do it on another video. But like tacit knowledge, where it's not something that you just learn in school. It's not something that you learn from a book. Like you can't learn how to play music, or I shouldn't say that. You can't learn how to like create music and play musical instruments well and like be a musician from a book. You can read a book and like see and learn the basics of something, and like the way music, notes, all that kind of stuff works. You can read a book about swimming, you can read a book about driving a car or like riding a motorcycle, and it'll give you an idea about it, but it's not the information isn't fully transferred that way. So that's like the first tip, is like understanding that this isn't something that you can read a book and get. Like other things. I mean, even cooking, you could read a cookbook, but you're probably going to have to do it multiple times before you nail it. And then you become a good cook and you can read a recipe, and then you can like crush it real easily. So that's the first thing, is understanding that like this isn't stuff that's easily transferred like through books, or even possible to get really transferred through a book. And I think the thing is so many guys who do well in life, so many of you guys out there who do well in life because of work and school and the way your brains are hardwired, the reason you do well in those aspects and areas and like school and stuff is because that's how your brain is, like it gravitates towards that. It's like this is how it learns, this is how it retains information. And what makes you good in that like path is the opposite of what emotional intelligence, EQ, IQ, EQ, and like that comes from experience, and you got to practice. It's the opposite. So basically what helps you do well in school and work like is what hurts you here. And the analogy I use is like, it's like when you're creating a video game character. So like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and you're doing your character and you're like doing really high in intelligence, but then his strength or dexterity or whatever is low. So I think that's kind of something to understand first, is like what helps me in other aspects is what hurts me here. And then just now that you know that, now you can go forward. And it's kind of the opposite, like the guys who are really good talkers and like really good in social environments and all that, and we're good at it, like even in school and dating and girls, like they're usually not the ones with the PhDs and running the companies and like the super intelligent guys. Like those it's usually two paths. It sucks because it's certainly when you're younger, you want to have the grass is always greener. You want that. But then when you're older, those guys want this. So with that all in mind, is I'm just going to answer this from my perspective. So I've got some books down there. I think you can, yeah, right there. Actually, I don't know if you guys can actually zoom in and see that American movie. There's a couple DVDs there. Just past it is some books. But I'm actually moving all my books to this bookshelf, and that's just going to be decoration. So for me, I just read the game. And I read it in 3 days, and I was out trying stuff on like night number 1, because this like flipped the switch in my head that this is something that you can get better at. There's like certain tips and tricks and lines and all that. I was like, oh, that just never even clicked in my head. So when it flipped that switch, that's what got me like so excited about it and gave me hope. And then I started using it, and then I had faith in it. So the game isn't a book that's like a how-to guide, but there's tons of information in there. And just when they start talking about openers and stuff, and some of the openers, I was like, oh, that opener's horrible. I'll never say that. That's so cheesy. It's not congruent with me. But I'll understand the structure of it and make it my own. And we started doing that. Well, I did that. I don't think I ever even used any can material at all until I was already working for Neil, and we went to go teach at the New York seminar, our very first one in boot camp and all that. And there's some commercials of that out there. And yeah, there's a crazy story about me with a girl. And then one of the students, like on video, one of my guys who was real tiny, Russian dude, heavy accent, bad teeth, all these things stacked against him. He's like making out with a girl in the club, and like I'm doing a debrief with guys at the table. So if you ever saw that video, that was the event. It wasn't until that was going to happen that I was like, oh shit, I better practice some of this stuff. So like a couple weeks before, I went out with my wingman, and we were using like the routines from the game. And by then I was good enough to make it all work. But I'm so glad I didn't use them at the beginning. And I just, like I said, I understood the structure, and then I made it my own. And then it was congruent, and it rolled. So first piece of reading materials, it's got to be the game. That's like what got so many of us into this. That's what inspired us. There's some information there. And then I went out and just started practicing. And I also know from the other things I've done. So I'm a firearms instructor. I was originally doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I started like in 98, 99. I started doing it. And I remember like I had watched training videos, the Half Gracie training videos. We didn't pirate them. There's actually like a little thing at the beginning where Half's threatening to come get people who pirate the videos. Like my brother, we actually like ordered them and had them on the shelf. And I remember watching them, and like none of it made sense. My older brother had started earlier. And I remember watching it, trying to like prepare for class, but none of it made sense because I didn't know anything yet. And then when I started training, I watched them again. It really didn't help. And then after I trained for a little bit, then I watched them. Then it actually like clicked. So I think I already knew that. And then also, like, I was a firearms instructor. I started working at the gun range in 1999. And in 2000, when I was 20 years old, I was already teaching. And I had watched like training videos back then. I had VHS tapes. I think I still got some of them on DVD, but that I transferred them to. Oh, actually, down there. But like I watched them, and like none of it made sense. I was watching stuff like on carbine and shotgun, but I'd only done handgun stuff up until that point. So like I didn't get it until I actually went out and practiced with those guns. Then I would watch the videos, and then I'd get some tips from it. So I already knew that from multiple examples. I got an edge weapon training. So I started doing like knife training classes, Filipino martial arts. I ended up going to gun sight and doing like 4 days of that, which totally changed my world because I was doing kinjutsu before that, and I trained that for a while. And then I found out that like didn't work. But I'd watched some videos on knife fighting and had books, like none of it made sense. And then after I trained it and started training it for a while, then I would see some of that stuff and it would make sense. So, anyways, multiple examples of that. Reading stuff, if you don't have a reference point or any experience, like you don't know what you don't know. You're unconsciously incompetent. So reading the extra books, it just doesn't, it's not even really helpful. And so many guys, like I said at the very beginning, the reason I said that is they're perfect preparers. They want to read the books. They want to read and prepare as much as they can before they go out and do it. And that's the wrong way. Like so many guys I met did that, and then none of them ever got good. And they were hoarding information. And I went through that phase a little bit, but tons of guys I know went through that phase, like still maybe are in that phase where they just torrented everything, downloaded everything, signed up for everything, went to multiple boot camps, but then they weren't approaching. So then they know theory and they love to critique or tell people what they're doing wrong or post on the forums, but they actually weren't cold approaching. They didn't have girlfriends. They weren't having fun. They weren't going on dates and doing what happens after dates. So then they don't know anything. And I couldn't even have a conversation with them about stuff because they had no real reference point. So read something and then go out and do it. Some of the books that are, they're kind of hidden. Some of them are over here. Like I moved to Hollywood and I was working for Neil. So like some of those books over there on the shelf that are good books, like I'm in them. I'm thanked in the back, which is mind blowing to me. Like Mystery putting a book out, and then we're having like he's doing a book release party, and I'm there, and then I'm thanked in the back when I pick it up. Like the Book of Poke. I don't know what that is, so clarify that, please. But I bought a lot of the books that they said to get, and I started trying to read them, and I never even started, or I read a couple pages, and I was like, I'll read this later, and I just never did it. Mystery's first book was the second book that I recommended. I think it's actually, I'm reorganizing everything, and I realized the book cover was somewhere else. So this one, The Mystery Method: How to Get Beautiful Women into Bed by Mystery. So I'm not in that one. And from what I know is that's kind of like his Venusian Arts handbook that they used to sell. And it gave you that structure, the M3 model, which I had heard from Neil that like that really came from him. That was like his indirect way of doing it. Mystery being like super smart, like figured out what he was doing, reverse engineered it, and then came up with like the structure. And I remember Neil saying we were talking about putting it in the office years ago. We were going to do like a little PUA rock and roll museum kind of thing. And I remember telling Neil, I was like, "Oh, we got to get a mannequin and put your snakeskin suit on one of the mannequins, like when you go to the Hard Rock." And like I was totally trolling him. And then I was like, "We could have your prop bag in the corner and like a thing of lint," like totally messing with him. But he actually said that he like still had the napkin that Mystery had sketched everything out with that night. And I was like, "Oh, we got to put that up there." Like I wanted to see it. I never got around to see it, but I was like, "That's cool. Like that's like a piece of history." So that's what I had heard. I never talked to Mystery about it, so I don't know his version of the story. But I remember when I read that, like it kind of made sense to me, but it really didn't resonate. And it just, I had always gone more direct and more natural. And I also think there was like, I'd heard stories about, oh, you need 7 hours of comfort before you escalate or whatever, or close. And like, I just knew that wasn't true. Like I dated girls where there wasn't that. I had done some crazy stuff and like started dating those girls, and they were cool. And there wasn't these things that were like in this structure that you like had to hit. And I remember like even one of the seminars we did, they were talking about the keto escalation. There was other coaches and people talking about like, you have to do A before you can do B. You have to do B before you can do C. And let's say that goes up all the way to R, or let's say it goes all the way up to F. And I was like, I'm just going to start with F. And there's some crazy stories about that. But there were some things like that that just didn't line up for me. So I liked it, and there was some good knowledge in it, obviously. And then the guys who need it, and the guys who are really scared of rejection and had horrible approach anxiety, like a lot of those guys at the beginning, indirect is much more beneficial than going direct. And they can practice on things. You can practice your small talk. When a guy has like horrible eye contact and body language and facial expressions and hand gestures and everything, vocal projection, vocal tonality, like when they're bad at all that stuff and you're having them go direct, like it just doesn't work. So indirect is so good for those guys because you can like small chunk those things. You already have the conversation all figured out because you've done it. I'm going to say A, they're going to respond back. Like there's an 80% chance they're going to respond back with this, a 15% chance they'll respond back with that, or a 5% chance, or maybe a 4% chance they'll respond with that, and then like a curveball. And then you kind of have your conversation all figured out, and you can kind of go on autopilot with that unconscious competence. And then you can like focus on the other things you need to. So anyways, the second book I usually recommended was Mystery's book. And I gotta be honest though, I still have never finished it. So I think I even loaned it out. I was looking for it and I don't have it there. So I always loaned those out, and I don't think I ever got one back. So maybe I'll get another one just to have it on the shelf. Maybe not. And that's it really for the books. I remember so many other books out there, so many PDFs. I had wingmen that were the hoarders of everything. They got all the stuff. They shared it with me. Never read it. Neil came out with rules of the game, which I'm in it. And some of those missions, like I thought they were cheeseball stuff. And I never like endorsed it and like recommended it. But there's lots of guys who did it and it really helped them. So I'm not like shitting on it. But it just wasn't congruent for me. So I never did it. And I was working on that project. I was helping them with the book with some stuff. So I read that book. I actually read it a couple of times, and like proofed it and did some other things. But and I did that with some of his other books. But that was really all the stuff I had read. And then after that, it was like seminars, and I would see guys speak. I would be at events. We'd have guest speakers. It got to the point where I was the conference manager, and I would pick the guest speakers. And really, I just started picking guys I wanted to hear them teach. And so like we had Zan and Steve P and Hypnotica and Ross and all these guys, Mystery, and that was cool. And then usually they would give like a talk, and there would be like one or two good nuggets there. And then some of them I became friends with, and then I'd get invited to their events. And like I remember Ross, I went to his speed seduction seminar, and like years ago, maybe I was thinking like, oh, if I'd gone to this years ago, it could have like helped me so much. But I honestly don't think I would have been able to grasp most of it back then. Like I just would have got like a first grade level. And so by then I'd already been teaching for years, and then heard his talk, and I was like, man, this is great. And like Johnny Saporno, I ended up going and speaking at his events. And man, for inner game, like he's amazing. Like some of the best stuff I've ever heard inner game from Johnny. And again, like stuff that years before I probably wouldn't have clicked. And so that's really where then I learned other things. And anyone who's ever worked with me who does phone coaching or one-on-ones, if we ever get to one of those things where I feel like, oh, hey, this is something I learned from so-and-so, it'll help you, then I'll actually share that. And I'll be like, oh, and this is from so-and-so. If you want more, go check them out. I highly recommend them. And, but there's usually only a handful of things on that. And like one of the examples I remember with Ross, he was explaining something, and I had just like started grasping it a little deeper. And then he explained it, and I was like, oh, that's clearly a guy who's had 20 more years or 30 years to like think about it more and break it down. And I remember like Johnny, I was talking about, or he was on stage talking about like that inner negative voice and how you respond to it. And he gave his version, and it was the exact opposite way of like how I dealt with it. Like mine was in like, I'm going to crush it kind of way. And his was like a lighthearted, easy, like dismissive way of getting rid of that inner voice. And it was great. And that was really helpful, because when there's guys I'm coaching who like I don't feel will get my version is it will resonate as much with them, then I'll use his. And that concept also like that idea is, hey, there's like a yin and yang to these lessons. That actually like was a huge lesson from him, and really then helped me with coaching like everything. So that's what happened later. But if you're starting out, you need to read something. The Game. That's what started all this whole thing. Definitely read The Game. I was trying to get a hard copy of Roosh's V book, Poozy, but he quit selling it. Yeah, I've seen him online and post some stuff, and there were some things I thought was like funny and interesting. And I remember when he was trolling Australia or whatever. But I've like I'm not. I never try to hate on guys. Well, there's some of them I do, but there's guys out there that I think are like helping and doing good stuff. But I don't know him. I've never gone to his events. I've never seen him really speak. So like I'm not qualified to like judge anything. But then there's a lot of guys I saw chunks of what they did, and it like I never thought about like looking more into it. And a simple way is like even just what I talked about earlier. Who did I just mention? Who did I like say did some good stuff? Like there's only a handful of guys in this whole thing that I was like, those guys are legit and good instructors. And a simple way is to like see who I'm friends with, see who like I go to events with and speak at, or there's pictures of us together at events. Like those are the guys that I thought can walk the walk and talk the talk. And there's very few. There's a lot of guys that can talk the talk and get on stage and can be on a video and come across really well, but they would hang out and that wasn't the case or whatever. So yeah. And then there's some other things I'd heard. Like I heard the book Models is good. I just haven't read it. Maybe I'll get around to reading it. But by then it's like I think I got to the point too where as an instructor, like I didn't want to read someone else's stuff and then someone's like, "Oh, you're teaching their things," and I'm like, I've never read anything of them. Whereas if I had, then I'd be lying if I was like, "Oh." So just the fact that I'm like, "Oh, I don't know that stuff." Like a musician is like, "I've never listened," or a comedian, "I've never listened to those comedians, so I don't know what they're doing." I don't even want that stuff in my head to like get swirled around in there. So it took a lot for me to see guys and go like, "Oh, that guy's like," you could tell who's legit and who's not. And I was like, "Oh, that guy's legit." And then I hear him speak, and I'm like, "Yep, that proved it." And because they know things and say things that other people like don't know. And even if it's totally different, like Johnny's like into open relationships and all that stuff, and that's clearly not for me. Like I'm married, I have a family, but he's all about that. So that makes it simple too, because I've had students who like I'm talking to. One of the first questions I asked was like, "What's your end goal?" And some of them don't want to get married, and some of them don't want to have a family, and they just want to casually date or be open to things and all that. And I'm like, go to so and so. Like Johnny's the guy for that. Like that's not me. And he's like I could give you some tips, but he's the expert. He's the guy walking the walk on that path. So that kind of makes it simple too. When I would meet guys who are in a totally different lane than me, but I could recognize recognizes game. So I was like, yep, they're legit, and they have a totally different vibe. And that was the other thing is sometimes students would be like, I'm like, you're not a good fit for me. You should go work with this guy. I think that would be a better fit. So that's really like the books are good. And this is how I answered the question before, but the books aren't going to really help you. The book doesn't help you. Like a mechanic book, a YouTube video on like working on your car, that's helpful. It's good as a reference. But like you can't watch that video and then go downstairs. At least I can't. Can't go downstairs and like replace my brakes on my car. But when I'm doing it and I rewatch the video and I do it and I mess it up and then, I forgot this, and I finally figure it out. And then I did it a handful of times. Like, now when I watch a video and the guy's like, hey, here's a pro tip. If you're doing it by yourself, here's what the parking brake, boom. I'm like, that's great. And then I absorb that and I instantly can retain that and I'll use it next time because I've done my brakes before. So again, that's the key with this stuff is Don't be bogged down reading the books. Don't be watching all the videos. Don't be torrenting. Like, learn some stuff, practice it. Practice it, practice it, practice it. Come back, learn some more stuff. And that's when I'm doing phone coaching with guys. The very first homework assignment is just 20 cold approaches. And then you do that, just cold approach. You don't even have to go anywhere else. Just open a conversation with strangers. Depending on your skill level, where you're at, attractive women, people, and then like younger people, or then anyone, like old people, women that work at the store that have to talk to you, that kind of thing. Depending on where you're at, that's like what you have to start with. And you just do that for a week. And then the next week we go, okay, now here's an opener and a transition. And then the next week, open, transition, DHV story. So right there, and each one's 20 conversations a week. So within like 4 calls, you should have at least done 80 approaches. And that's just open, transition, DHV, and then follow up. So that's like the super basic, just first couple minutes of a conversation. So yeah, that's why there's just, you don't see me posting about books and stuff all the time. So that's why I thought this was a good question, because I joked that I'm a caveman, and I read the game, read a little bit of Mysteries book after, and picked it up multiple times since, like throughout the years, and read some more. But last time I touched it was 15 years ago in LA when I lived out there. And I was like, oh, let me get some more into it. And that's it. I haven't even read 2 PUA books. Well, I take that back. Besides the work stuff or the ones I had to, like, I haven't even read 2. So we got some visitors. So if anyone has a question, you guys can hop on and ask that. Otherwise, I'm going to be moving over to Discord, which is a little more private and therefore more adult. And we can say things that we can't say on YouTube. So the link is always on in all the comments. And then on my website, there's Bravo Hood Discord. So any questions, we'll do that. Otherwise, like I said, we'll hop over there for a little before I call it a night. And yeah, I got some more questions that were sent in. I don't want to say it and go through them on this video, because like each one can just be like a separate video. Otherwise, guys have to watch this and watch 27 minutes to just get to the second question. Like, I watch YouTube all the time. I know how it goes. So going once, going twice. If there's anything else, I'll do it. Otherwise, I'm going to bounce. But the Roosh guy, I saw him. I remember his website was big and all that, but I just remember him trolling Australia. Like when they were, I think it was the RSD guys and then him. Those were the 2 that were getting like canceled. And I could be misremembering this, but I thought he was talking about going to Australia. And then he's like, oh, I saw someone like from the military, like the Coast Guard, the Navy had responded and was like, oh, we're secure. We're not going to let you through. Oh no, he had said, I've been looking like at the security, and it's like there's holes of like Swiss cheese in there, and like someone made a GIF or a picture of him like sailing a boat through like cheese holes. And then I think like the Navy or Coast Guard or whatever their version of that is responded and was like, oh no, we're not going to let you in. Like, I remember when that happened, it was one of the funniest things I'd like ever seen in the whole community industry, all this stuff. And I think it was just, like I said, one of the funniest things ever. Such high level trolling. So I love that, but I never really saw him. Never went to his websites. And I saw a little bit of it, but we were like so big and doing our thing that like, and then I started my own thing. Was just so busy with that like you don't have time to go around and see all this other stuff and see what other people are doing unless you're going to events and speaking with them. And then I became very, very, very quickly, I became very, very picky on which events I would go to, because so many of them were just so cheesy. And just internet marketing, promo videos they were trying to make. Or what a lot of guys would do is they would have some guest speakers there, and then the guys who were running it would try to go up and speak. And that way they try to like social proof themselves with the other speakers and put them on the same pedestal, and they weren't like at all, and like just not good instructors and stuff. And then they'd have their friends come up and teach too, and those guys weren't that solid. But then there would be like some legit name guys, and they would teach. And then that became cool because I became friends with some. I'd hang out. Like there was guys, I was like, oh, I like this guy. I want to go see what he has to say. And then I'd just be in there and just listen as a student. And then sometimes there'd be good notes, a couple bullet points I would take. And afterwards I'd go up and like tell them it was cool, or tell them how that was like such an awesome point, something I'd never thought of. And then they usually would respond cool. And then we'd hang out and grab a beer or smoke a cigar or whatever afterwards. Sometimes we trained and did martial arts and stuff. And I made some friends, and it was cool. There were some good dudes in there. But obviously you got to remember, all the guys who get into this stuff, like they usually are having some issues in life. So social anxiety, bad dating skills, like those are all usually symptoms of larger overall issues. So the guys who get into this stuff are usually like we have issues. And then the guys that stick around, like those were still those guys. And the guys who become coaches or instructors, like those were still those guys. And unfortunately, a lot of times they don't work on the stuff they really need to truly level up. They might just get good at picking up girls, but then you hear stories about them doing boot camps and getting like drunk and shit faced on it, or doing drugs and getting canceled, or kicked out of the clubs. Or then like students, like I'd be at events and the students they'd always come up and talk to me afterwards, like, oh my God, Bravo, so-and-so, we went out last night. You can't believe it. And so I heard just so much crazy stuff. So simple ways: who am I friends with? Who am I talking to? Who you see like posting pictures, that kind of stuff. Like those are the guys I think are good. And most of them are still teaching. They just kind of not as primarily like their focus, but there was some really good stuff those guys were doing. So then that's what I'd recommend: is don't read the books, go out, practice the stuff, and then go learn from a mentor. There's only one shortcut in life, is learning from someone else who didn't have the shortcuts. Like, so that's the key with this, is like you can grind it out like I did, or you can learn from someone who was grinding for years and then get the shortcuts that they can give you. So that's actually my final thought on that, is read the game, grind, and then find a mentor. And on that, I'm going to hop over to Discord. So if anyone wants to go over there, cool. And I wish you guys all the best. And I think the plan is going to be Tuesday. I will be trying to live stream every Tuesday, and then putting it up on the blog after it renders and everything, putting up on the website like on Thursday, and on the other YouTube channel. And that'll be it for a little bit. And then once these get a little more momentum, then I might start doing them at other times also. But still in the learning phase of this. But anyways, I hope you guys all have a good one. And if you guys ever have any questions or anything, reach out. Just, you can message me and I can respond. If you're on the Discord, I'm on there all the time, like helping guys out. And if you really need help, then obviously phone coaching, one-on-ones. That's like, this is still my job, my primary job. I do tactical training, martial arts training, but this stuff is still my primary gig. So anything you guys need, reach out and I'll do my best to help you. Have a good night, guys.